Chapter 271, Nightmares X. Quote. Alexia, I didn't want to believe the conclusion I had reached even as the name left my lips. But I knew I wasn't mistaken. That girl, that small, trembling girl, was definitely Alexia. Perhaps she had dyed her hair black, but her terrified face, her tearful glassy eyes, and her voice, quivering though it was, were undoubtedly hers. Alexia von Zinks. You don't remember this moment, do you? The distorted voice slid into my ears again, close enough to sound as if it was coming from right next to me. I couldn't reply. I wanted to, but I was so shaken I couldn't force out a single word. So the voice continued in my stead. Why would you? It was just another evening for you, maybe a touch more lavish than your usual routine. But for that little girl, it was horrifying. I watched as little Alexia resisted the tugging of my friends, crying and shaking more openly now. But my friends were many, and they easily pulled her into the hedge maze, farther and deeper, until the garden lights no longer reached us. The laughter of the other guests faded behind the thick walls of green. Only the sound of her sobs and the rustle of leaves followed us now. My younger self was at the lead, smirking. His golden eyes glinted in the dim lantern glow. He looked like he was having fun. Little Alexia crouched low, trying to make it harder for us to pull her. Her small hands clawed at the dirt and grass, but she was too weak, too small. Each tug simply dragged her farther inside. And I couldn't move. I was rooted in place, forced to watch this scene play out like a chained spectator. Let me jog your memory, the voice murmured with venom threading every syllable. One of your friends spotted a small blind girl sitting in a corner. He thought it'd be funny to scare her, to leave her in the middle of the maze and see if she could find her way out. And you didn't stop him. In fact, you got your other friends involved. I watched as my younger self barked orders at his friends, though I couldn't quite make out his words over the pounding in my ears. The boys around him laughed louder. Then they started tugging at Alexia's arms and dress harder, like hyenas pulling at prey. Her small hands groped helplessly for something, anything, to hold onto. Dirt, roots, grass. But it didn't matter. In the end, they all dragged her to the center of the maze and pushed her to the ground. My stomach was in knots. Do you remember now? The voice hissed. She begged for it to stop. And you laughed. Samael Kaiser Theosbane. Little Alexia's quavering voice broke the air. Please, stop. Don't leave me here. I can't see. Her small body curled into itself, nothing more than a trembling ball of black hair and pale limbs. My younger self crouched in front of her, grinning like a wolf. Then whispered something to her, something only the two of them could hear. And Alexia froze. Has it come back to you now? The voice coiled around my ears, sounding almost delighted to make me watch this. Do you remember what you said to her? I did. It had, in fact, come back to me. All of it. As much as I wanted this vision to be false, just another fake illusion meant to play with my mind. I knew it wasn't. It was real, because now I remembered the words I'd said that night. This only happened because you're weak, not blind. My father says being born weak isn't a sin, but staying weak definitely is. So take this as a lesson to get stronger. That was what I told her. Alexia's lips trembled as she stared blankly in the direction of my younger self's voice, her small hands clutching her pala as if it could anchor her. Then I saw my younger self stand. He straightened his blazer, brushed invisible dirt from his hands, and turned his back on her. The other boys followed suit, still snickering and whispering jokes about the game they'd just played. They left her there, a scared blind girl in the center of a maze she couldn't navigate, and walked back toward the glowing garden lights like nothing had happened. I watched them go. I watched me go. It was like watching a stranger wearing my face. Alexia's soft sobs echoed behind us, fading into the darkness of the hedge walls. I wanted to run to her. To kneel and pull her out. To say, I'm sorry. But I couldn't. My legs stayed locked. My throat stayed dry. Was I really such a horrible person? You see it now, the voice murmured. It didn't even sound gleeful anymore, just cold. You've hidden it under layers of jokes, arrogance, and a dismissive attitude. But you remember exactly what you are. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know it was her. I didn't know it was Alexia. That's your excuse, the voice snapped. So what you did was fine if it was someone else. And let's be honest, it wouldn't have mattered either way even if you knew it was her. You see, Samael, you grew bitter over how your father treated you. So you started taking out that bitterness on others. You justified yourself by claiming you never bullied anyone without a reason, but you always found a reason, always. And when you didn't, you had your friends bully them, insisting you never lifted a finger yourself. But you forget, ignorance is complicity. And you are an accomplice. You are a monster. I shook my head. Shut up. This time the voice pressed closer, like a whisper slithering down my spine. I know this because I'm your subconscious. I'm practically you, so it's no use denying it because I already know you inside out, your thoughts, your insecurities, your true nature. I know you know what you are. Admit it. I gritted my teeth and turned around. Quiet. ... But as soon as I turned, the scene around me shifted again. This time, I was back in Ishtara. Back among those burning streets, the crumbling buildings, and the harrowing monsters mauling people to death in the most gruesome ways imaginable. The voice started again, but this time I cut it off. I said quiet, I yelled, and in the momentary silence that followed, I took a few calming breaths. My spiraling emotions eased, coming back under my control. My legs, which had felt rooted to the ground, loosened. I could walk again, so I started walking. You think I don't know what I am? I spat bitterly. I'm under no illusions. I'm a monster, a bully, a villain, sure. But don't you dare think you can weaponize my past against me. I made a bunch of kids' lives hell, you say. So what? I saved hundreds just last week. I orchestrated the destruction of Ishtara. So fucking what? They were all going to die anyway. At least now their sacrifice means something. I sabotaged the syndicate's plan. They were going to spark a world war. Do you have any idea how many more would have died if I'd done nothing? Millions. I saved millions by sacrificing a few thousand. You have no right to play God with people's lives. You can't decide who lives and who dies. No, I roared, cutting it off again without breaking stride. I have every fucking right. I alone am burdened with the knowledge of what's coming. I alone carry the weight of saving the world. So yes, I alone have the right to play God. I do get to decide who lives and who dies. Because if I don't, if I hesitate, if I stay passive, then everyone dies. I'll do what's needed. I'll stop the spirit king no matter the cost. Even if you have to betray friends, slaughter innocents, burn cities to cinders. Do you still believe you're the only one who has that right? The voice asserted. I will. I am. I said, resolute. Someone has to make the hard choices. If not me, then who? A council of cowards, puppets, monarchs, half of whom are too short-sighted to see anything beyond preserving their own power. No, better one guilty man with a plan than a billion helpless hands. The voice fell silent. The burning city of Ishtara dissolved and faded out of view. There was nothing around me now but endless darkness. Still, I walked. I walked until my feet ached and my own footsteps were the only sound left in the void. There were no more illusions. No more accusations. No more guilt trips. Just a pathless expanse of black stretching endlessly in every direction. It felt like I'd been walking for hours, but there was no sense of time here. There were no stars, no horizon. Nothing. And yet, I didn't stop. You're still running, you know. The voice said at last. It sounded much softer now. Not mocking, not taunting, just tired. I'm moving forward. There's a difference. My eyes stayed fixed forward, even though there was no forward. You can't keep me here forever. Finally, after a long time, or maybe in only a span of few seconds, I saw something. Cracks. Thin white cracks started spreading across the darkness, leaking blinding white light that pushed back the darkness. Slowly, the cracks grew, splintering wider with every step I took, until the void itself began to fracture. I knew if I stepped through one of those cracks, I'd wake up. There was no hard logic to my reasoning. Only instincts. I just knew. ... Like I knew the voice would do anything to stop me from crossing over. And it did. You're right, it whispered. I can't keep you here forever. But I can make it so that you won't want to leave. I almost scoffed, as if to say that's impossible. When suddenly, I felt a touch. Real, physical touch. I flinched, but before I could react any further, someone had wrapped their arms around me from behind. Not to restrain me, but to embrace. And then, I heard a voice. Not the distorted, nightmarish voice that had been tormenting me until now. No, I heard a human voice. A familiar voice. I heard my mother's voice. I missed you, dear, she said, sounding every bit as remorseful as my real mother would sound after spending an eternity away from me. How have you been, my boy? Chapter 272, Nightmares X. My body went cold, my eyes widened, my breathing grew shallow, and my knees threatened to buckle beneath me. For the first time since I had unwillingly been pulled into this nightmare, I began to tear up. I tried my best not to give in and cry my heart out, because I knew if I did, I'd be trapped here. But all my effort was for nothing. Because the moment she spoke next, I broke down. Has it been tough without me, Sam? Her voice was like a ray of sunlight splitting a storm cloud. It was soft, warm, and impossibly real. The way she said my name, no one else ever said it like that. Not even in my dreams. It crawled under my skin, bypassed every defense, and struck straight at the boy I used to be. I clenched my jaw, but my throat trembled. My fingers, stiff as stone, began to shake. I clawed weakly at her arms as they tightened around me. She was so close that I could smell her perfume, the faint rose and smoke scent I remembered from my childhood. A scent I had buried so deep beneath memories and pain that I'd forgotten it until now. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Her words were velvet over razors. I've watched you all this time. You've been so strong, so brave. All alone, carrying so much. I'm sorry I had to leave you. I'm so sorry, baby. My chest caved under the weight of her voice. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to turn and bury my face into her shoulder. I wanted the years of bitterness to dissolve in that single embrace. But I didn't. Not yet. I stopped myself. I stopped myself until I couldn't anymore. My knees gave way. I collapsed to the ground, and it was like a dam burst inside me. Tears I'd fought so hard to hold back spilled over. I started weeping. My voice was raw and unrestrained. Everything, every bit of hate and anger I had been withholding since I lost my mother clawed its way out. One of her hands moved up and began stroking my head gently, the way she used to. That did it. I cried harder, and harder still, until I couldn't even breathe properly. But I wasn't crying because she was holding me again after all these years. I was crying because her touch felt wrong. And, this isn't her scent, I choked between hiccups and sobs. This isn't her voice. The rose and smoke perfume was just a little strong. She had never smelled quite like this. Her voice was just a pitch higher. She had never sounded quite like this either. Or maybe she had. I couldn't tell. I couldn't remember anymore. I was crying because I was forgetting. I was forgetting my own mother. That realization hit me like a physical blow. Her arms tightened even more around me, just enough to feel real, just enough to burn. I clawed at them again, desperate to break free. This wasn't her. I knew this wasn't her. I gasped and curled into myself on the cold, empty ground. My tears blurred the endless nothingness around me. I really was forgetting her. I couldn't remember her properly. I was losing her. I was losing the memory of my own mother. It's fine, she breathed against my ear, sounding falsely tender. I'm right here. I'm right here. Her voice carried the cadence of comfort but none of its soul. Each word she uttered was soft, yet hollow, and still, my heart ached at the sound. You're not her, I rasped. My fingernails dug into her wrists but found no strength to push her away. You're not my mother. I'm right here, she repeated, smoother now, like a lullaby. I never left you, my baby. I shook my head. My tears rolled down her hands, soaking into something that was not skin. Stop saying that. You're not her. You're not. The next words never left my mouth. My hands slipped from her arms and fell limp at my sides. Because even knowing the truth, I couldn't just shove her off. I had spent nights as a child praying for this, praying for her, for even a whisper of her voice. I had begged the stars, the gods, anyone who would listen, to give me back my mother after she gave her life to drag me back from death. And now here she was, wrong and false and imperfect, but here. Nonetheless, my head fell back against her shoulder, and my body trembled violently. I missed you, I sobbed. I missed you so much. Her fingers threaded through my hair in the same old rhythm. The rhythm I had dreamed of. Shish, she cooed. You don't have to suffer anymore. You can stay right here. Because I'm right here. I kept telling myself it was an illusion. But my arms rose anyway, and weakly clung to her like a drowning child to driftwood. That was when the cracks in the darkness around me began to close. One by one, thin seams of light flickered out, swallowed by the encroaching black. Soon, it was all reduced to nothing but me and her. My attention snapped. I instinctively tried to get up, but she pulled me back down. Her hand kept patting my head as she repeated the same thing over and over, the same thing I had always wanted to hear deep down. It's fine, I'll never leave you again. Never, my baby. And I could do nothing but cry helplessly into her. Until my throat was sore. Until the last sliver of light extinguished. Until there was nothing left but the dark, and her arms, and the faint warmth that wasn't hers. I was trapped with my mother who wasn't my mother at all. And still, I grabbed onto her. Because I feared I'd lose her completely if I let go. So I didn't. Gah! A ragged gasp tore itself from my throat as I jolted awake. My eyes fluttered open and I shot upright into a sitting position, frantically taking in my surroundings. It seemed I was lying on a carpet of moss. Massive trees surrounded me from every direction, their canopies obscuring the view as far as I could see. High above, the starless night sky was cracked, and at its zenith, surrounded by dangling shards of broken reality, hung a bleeding red moon. Okay, from the looks of it, I wasn't inside the illusion anymore. Probably. Now, where are the others? I muttered, narrowing my bleary eyes. I was about to push myself to my feet and survey the area when an all too familiar voice rang out from behind me. Oh, look who's finally awake. I whipped my head around, only to see Alexia carrying an unconscious Kong over her shoulders in a fireman's carry. Behind her, in the distance, was the ancient temple we had so foolishly decided to explore. No, seriously, what was Michael thinking suggesting we go inside, huh? Anyway, judging by where I was and what Alexia was doing, it was safe to assume she'd been the one to drag me out of the temple. Don't need to thank me or anything, Lord Samael, she called with a smug smirk. It's not like I saved your life or something like that. Oh, wait, I did. Fine, if you insist, you can recommend me for the Medal of Bravery. But make sure it's the Golden Duke who awards me, please. I have a reputation to uphold. She came to a stop, a few feet to my left. And instead of me, she was very obviously talking to a tree. It was only then that I realized she didn't have her origin card active. I'm here, I said flatly. Alexia froze, then turned her head toward my voice, looking slightly embarrassed. Of course. I was merely admiring this beautiful flower in front of me. There was no flower in front of her. She twirled and walked toward where she thought I was, but this time ended up arriving in front of a boulder. Right, so as I was saying, there's no need to thank me. And now she was talking to that boulder. I facepalmed, then got up myself, and stepped over to her. As I helped her unload Kong onto the ground, I asked, so, what happened? You're asking me, she shrieked. That's what I've been asking all of you. You were all talking about some things, but no one clarified anything to me. Then you ordered everyone to run out of the temple, so I did. But halfway out, I realized no one was following me. I tried calling you all out, but no one answered. My cards weren't working, so I had to stumble around in the dark until I found you all frozen in place. Nobody was moving. After a lot of shaking and slapping, I decided I'd have to carry you all out one by one. So I picked the nearest person, you, and dragged you out first. Huh, I see. You weren't affected by those eyes. Must be because you didn't see them. I nodded, then immediately winced. Ouch, why does my neck hurt so much? Alexia blinked, then looked away. Oh, I may have dropped you. On your head on the way out. What? I exclaimed, somewhere between outraged and wary. You dropped me, on my head. Alexia coughed into her hand, looking anywhere but at me. Well, in my defense, you're heavier than you look. And also, the ground was uneven. The jungle ground was uneven. I rubbed my neck furiously. That's your excuse. Yes, she said with confidence. Tragically uneven. I myself am a victim, Samael. A victim of unfortunate topography. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Aren't you some kind of once-in-a-generation martial arts prodigy? You should be capable enough to walk on uneven fucking ground. Yet you almost cracked my skull open. Well, she said, tilting her head with mock thoughtfulness, to be fair, you already act like someone with brain damage, so I don't think it would have made much of a difference. My jaw dropped. Did you just? Hey, she cut in, folding her arms, I'm hearing a lot of complaints and too little thanks. I saved your life. You should be building gold statues of me in your garden by now. Statues, I barked. I wouldn't even hang a portrait of you in my broom closet. Wow, she sniffed, affronted. I didn't know the new generation Theospanes had grown to be so ungrateful. What happened to your family always paying their debts, huh? I groaned and dragged my hands over my face while telling myself, don't kill her, Sam. Don't kill her. She's important. While we bickered, Kong stirred softly on the moss, letting out a weak groan before slumping back down. That reminded us there was still something far bigger going on than Alexia's incompetence and my impending aneurysm. I exhaled sharply. All right, enough. I'll wake him. You go in and carry the others out of the temple. Roger, Alexia nodded, dusting off her sleeves. Then she cocked her head, staring blankly at empty air 2 feet to my right. By the way, don't come near the temple. Even after leaving its gates, my soul arsenal stays suppressed for a few minutes. And as soon as I go back inside, it gets suppressed all over again. So whatever had you all frozen might still be active in there. I glared at her. Yeah, that's good to know, but I'm over here. She blinked again, then quickly adjusted her stance. Yes, I knew that. I was simply testing your reflexes. You failed. Chapter 273, Escape. For 30 long minutes, I watched a blind girl stumble through an ancient temple and carry people out on her back, people who would all one day become the heroes of this godforsaken world. And for 30 long minutes, I watched her drop every single one of them on their heads. I facepalmed. This girl is going to give everyone brain damage. Still, by the end of it, all of them were rescued. That was the important part. By the time the last of them were laid out in a neat little row, I'd run out of energy to yell at Alexia. So instead, I just stared up at the sky and prayed to the heavens to give me patience. Then we started waking everyone up. It took a while, but one by one, they began to stir. Lily was the first. She sat up, blinking rapidly, her face pale and her hands trembling. She opened her mouth to speak, but cut herself off with a choked breath and clutched her temples. Michael woke up next. He bolted upright with a gasp, his chest heaving as though he'd been drowning. His head darted around in panic. He looked wild and disoriented and shaken to the core. For a second, I thought he was about to summon a weapon. Thankfully, he calmed down before doing anything drastic and just slumped back against the ground, tears brimming in his eyes. I was genuinely surprised by the state he was in. His condition was worse than I thought. I had a pretty good idea what his nightmare must have been, something about his parents' disappearance, no doubt. But I really thought Zaldrith would have protected him. He could have, easily, but he didn't, and I could guess why. Zaldrith wanted Michael to be as miserable as possible. He wanted him isolated and broken. That had always been his goal, even in the game. He'd play nice on the surface and act amicably, if a bit passive, all while quietly plotting behind Michael's back, doing anything to push him closer and closer to the edge. Why? Because once Michael's life would completely fall apart, he'd stop resisting and fully surrender to Zaldrith's power. And once that happened, Zaldrith would take over Michael's body and resurrect through him. What a devious little bastard. Then again, all demons were like that. Especially Asmodeus. Asmodeus was the cleverest of them all. That's why I was always on edge around him. He was smart enough to play me like a fiddle, and I probably wouldn't even notice until it was far too late. God, I hate smart creatures. Well, regardless, I figured I didn't need to worry about Michael too much. Not yet, at least. Not until his life was entirely in shambles, because if that happened, well, the world would head toward a dark ending. And that would be a real pain to deal with. Anyway, my attention soon shifted to Juliana as she stirred softly. She didn't scream or gasp when she woke up. She just opened her eyes and lay still. But her face was ashen. Her jaw was tight, and her hand twitched like she was suppressing the urge to claw her own skin off. Whoa, now for her, I was definitely worried. I'd never seen her look so crushed. Just what the hell did she see in there? Her family's slaughter? No, that alone wouldn't elicit such a saddened reaction from her. After years, she had hardened her mind. Very few things could shake her so much anymore. So whatever she'd seen in her nightmare, it had to be something far worse than what had already happened to her. I was about to walk over to her, but Vince's groan snapped my focus. He rolled onto his side and let out a broken sob in a hoarse voice. What the hell was that? I saw my sister and... His words died on his tongue, his hands gripped a fistful of his hair as he curled into himself. Yeah, I expected that reaction from him. Along with Juliana, Vince's backstory in the game had been the most miserable out of all the main characters, meaning his nightmare had plenty of material to torture him with. Ray was the last to open his eyes. He sat up with a hollowed look, glanced around, then buried his face in his hands and just stayed that way for a long time. The air was heavy, the moss beneath us felt colder. The red moon bled its crimson light somewhere over the distant horizon. And the mood was exactly what you'd expect when a bunch of kids are reminded they desperately need to seek therapy. What about me? Oh, I was fine. I actually recovered the fastest. Sure, I felt a little ashamed for letting a false apparition of my mother trick me into lowering my guard. But honestly, I would have been able to escape that nightmare on my own. Eventually. Yes, it might have taken me a lot of time, but still. Even without Alexia rescuing me, if her attempt to crack my skull open could even be called that, I was confident I would have been fine. The others, however, were completely, utterly, and hopelessly rattled. Oh, and speaking of Alexia, she stood a few steps away, hands on her hips, evidently baffled as she scowled from one dejected face to the next. "All right," she said slowly, "what in the hell happened in there? You all look like you just got emotionally sucker punched by your grandmothers." I sighed. That's actually not too far off. Her sightless gray eyes turned vaguely toward me. Explain. So, I did. We moved as far from the temple as we could in our deteriorated mental state. Eventually, when we couldn't keep going on anymore, we stopped and decided to set up camp. No one wanted to keep walking. No one wanted to talk much either. The depressing silence was all that could be heard between us. Thankfully, Ray was the first to recover after me. By the time a small campfire was lit in the middle, he was looking just as lively as ever. In fact, he'd even taken out his drone and started recording a vlog again. "Welcome back, Radiance," he began in a voice far too cheerful for someone who'd just escaped an endless psychological torture. "It's day 7, or maybe 8. I don't remember right now. We all just had the worst collective nap in history. Everyone's traumatized, but I'm the most traumatized, so I win. ... Not even close." He angled the camera toward Vince. Vince threw a stick at him, and missed. "Stop it. How do you even have the energy for this nonsense?" Ray smirked. "Because life is a show, brother. And as the star of this show, it's my duty to entertain my lovely viewers." Juliana, sitting all alone by herself in the distance with her knees pulled up, didn't even look at him. "Then entertain them by dying quietly." Ray zoomed in on her face. "Oh, look, it's character development. Our Ice Queen is finally threatening me instead of ignoring me." Juliana scoffed and kept looking away. Michael, on the other hand, frowned. "What are you even doing, Ray?" He wasn't talking about the vlog. He was talking about the small pot Ray had just taken out of his storage satchel and placed over the fire. Ray blinked back at Michael, confused as if whatever he was doing was the most obvious thing in the world. "Making tea, of course." Lily's face went pale. "From the herbs you gathered earlier. Ray, the last time you brewed tea from those, it didn't taste anything like tea." Kong, normally the quiet one, also visibly tensed up this time. "Yeah, man, last time I drank your tea, I saw sounds." Ray blinked. "You what?" "I saw sounds." "Sounds," Kong repeated, throwing his arms up. "Every time someone spoke, I could see the words floating in the air." Ray clapped his hands together in delight. "So you were high? That's amazing. Do you know how much Awakened pay for drugs that could actually work on them? I gave you some for free." "You're welcome. I don't want to get high," Kong yelled. All right, calm down." Ray sighed, clearly disappointed at the fact that no one here was daring enough to share his artistic vision. "Don't worry. I promise this tea won't have any unexpected side effects, probably." Kong groaned. And so did everyone else. But despite all their protests, Ray kept brewing the tea anyway. That started a little tradition. For every night after that one, Ray insisted on making his special tea and forced all of us to drink it, much to the group's equal parts annoyance and reluctant amusement. The routine became a bizarre kind of comfort. Everyone would roll their eyes but drink it anyway. ... Everyone except Juliana. She'd just toss the tea and use the hot cup to warm her hands instead. One day, though, even she would drink it. But that day was still down the line. Chapter 274, Apologies Among Friends. While all that was happening, I sneaked toward the edge of the camp. There, I found our short, blind, ginger savior. She was sitting cross-legged on a flat boulder, hands joined in her lap. Her eyes were closed, and her posture upright yet relaxed. She was meditating. I'd noticed she did that a lot. Whenever she had a moment to spare, she would start meditating. Personally, I couldn't do it. Sitting still and doing nothing indefinitely was not my thing. Blame my short attention span. 5 minutes of total silence and I'd start mentally arguing with myself about whether that random girl 3 years ago was flirting with me or just secretly hated my guts. Still, watching Alexia now, I couldn't help but feel curious. She was always so calm and composed, probably the wisest one among us all, at least when she wasn't acting her age. The firelight didn't reach her here, but the crimson glow of the moon did. It outlined her against the dark forest, making her seem almost ethereal. I approached quietly, unsure whether to disturb her or not. The moment my foot brushed against a twig, though, her head tilted slightly. I grimaced, then forced a tight smile. "Ah, hi." The smile that Alexia gave in response to my voice was much brighter than my own. "Oh, hi, Samael. What's up?" Now, I'll say this, I'm not someone who feels guilt easily. In all my years of life, I've rarely ever faced that feeling. Like I said back in my nightmare, I'm the kind of person who owns my mistakes and choices, and walks forward with them. But when I saw Alexia's cheerful face looking in my rough direction, something in my chest wrenched. I don't know why, she wasn't even my friend, let alone someone I cared about much. So what if I'd done something bad to her when we were younger? People do bad things all the time. That's life. You get hurt, you heal, you move on. But the problem was, she never did. Alexia still definitely remembered what happened. She hadn't forgotten. At best, she'd forgiven. And somehow, that made me feel even worse than I was already feeling. "Nothing much," I finally said, shoving my hands into my pockets. It was a chilly night. "Just checking if our resident monk has achieved enlightenment yet." She giggled. "Not yet, but the piece is nice. You should try it sometime." "What, meditating?" I scoffed like she'd offered something ridiculous. "No thanks." Last time I sat alone with my thoughts for more than 10 seconds, I started reconsidering my entire existence. Did not like where that went. "That's kind of the point." She shook her head with a patient little smile that indicated I had said something silly. To face it, I stared at her for a moment. This girl was truly impossible, blind, barely up to my shoulders, and somehow still making me feel like the childish one. Then my gaze fell on the long, white wooden cane lying beside her. And I froze. I never saw you using a cane before." Alexia frowned for a second, then her face went, "Oh," as she picked up the cane, turning it idly in her hands as if she'd just remembered it was there. "Right," she said, "that's because I don't use it at the academy. Only in the dorms. I hate this thing." Her tone wasn't bitter, just matter of fact, just casual. But it made me fall silent for a second that felt like it somehow stretched far, far longer than it should have. Then I took a deep breath, as if gathering every ounce of courage I could muster, before blurting out, I remember our first meeting now." Her hand froze mid-motion on the cane, and she raised an eyebrow. The smile on her face turned into something softer. "Oh, do you?" "Yeah." I scratched the back of my neck. I don't. I was struggling to find words. "I mean, what do you even say in a situation like this? There isn't exactly a step-by-step instruction manual on how to apologize to a blind girl you most definitely traumatized as a kid." Luckily for me, Alexia took the reins immediately. She cut me off before I could finish whatever nonsense I was trying to mumble. "Samael, it's fine." I paused, staring at her blankly. Huh, Alexia continued in the same breath. "You weren't wrong. What you said that night, as harsh as it was, wasn't wrong." Once again, there was no bitterness in her words. Her voice was as gentle as it could have been, yet I could still feel the quiet sting of melancholy behind it. "Do you remember what I told you and Mikey back in Ishtara?" she asked. "I told you my lineage is a legacy of perfection. Each child in our family is expected to surpass the last, either in strength or mind. No flaws are tolerated, no weakness is permitted. And then, I was born with," she gestured toward her sightless gray eyes, "with a glaring flaw, with a crippling weakness. So my father tried to fix me. And when he couldn't, he tried to hide me. It would have been so easy to just hate him. It really would have been, if he didn't love me so much. But he did. He loved me more than anything, Samael. Even though, in his eyes, I brought him nothing but shame, he loved me." The edge in her voice dulled a little. She sounded deliberate and careful, talking the way people do when some memories still hurt but they've learned to speak around the pain. "But his love was suffocating," she gritted. "He saw me as something fragile, something to protect, like I was made of glass. His plan for me was a safe political marriage. It was made clear to me, from a very young age, that I had no choice. I had no say in my own life. And I was going to accept it. I was going to keep my head low and do as I was told for the good of the family. I was going to accept my fate, because I was born weak. Because I was born without a choice. She looked up. The moonlight caught her pale eyes, making them shimmer like two shards of glass. Then I met you, and although that meeting was unpleasant, to say the least, your words stuck with me. She gave a small shrug. You told me that what happened to me wasn't because I was blind, but because I was weak. That being born weak isn't a sin, but staying weak is. She paused, her fingers absently brushing along the wooden cane. At first, I hated you for saying that. I hated you so much I used to dream of proving you wrong, of finding you someday and throwing those words right back in your face. She tittered. But after some time, I realized something. You weren't wrong. You were cruel and heartless, definitely. But not wrong. Because weakness isn't just physical, it's surrendering before even trying. It's hiding behind pity, behind excuses, behind what the world says you can't do. Weakness is not making your own choice. And I was doing exactly that. Her hands tightened around the cane. That night changed something in me. I swore I'd never let anyone make me feel that helpless again. So I trained until I could fight without needing eyes. Until my fists could answer for me. Until I could get back up again and again after being pushed down. And I did. Blood, adrenaline, rebellion, it all tasted like freedom. Like everything I'd ever been missing. She exhaled softly. So yes, you did hurt me. You humiliated me. You made me cry so much that night I thought I'd never stop. But you also gave me a reason to stand. A reason to become strong. I stood there in silence. My throat felt tight. So, you don't hate me. Alexia grinned at me. Now, no, when I met you during the evaluation exam, though, I did kind of want to beat you up a little. But that didn't go quite as planned. After that, the more I observed you, the more I realized you'd changed. You were still very arrogant and very annoying to deal with, but you had changed. And I wasn't the same little girl anymore either. So what's the point of hating someone who doesn't even exist anymore? Besides, you've saved my life, like, twice already. I think I'd be the asshole between us if I still hated you now. Her lips curved up a little more. And I found myself smiling back at her. After a moment, I sighed. Still, I'm sorry. I really am. Yeah, Alexia nodded quietly. Yeah, I know. But as I told you already, it's fine. Apologies are unnecessary among friends. A hushed silence followed. The wind rustled through the towering trees, carrying the scent of smoke and pine and the disturbingly loud chorus of chirping insects. Somewhere in the camp, someone fell asleep and started snoring loud enough to wake the dead. The blood-red moon kept bleeding crimson light endlessly across the shattered sky. And I felt the ache in my chest melt into a strange, fuzzy feeling. I was sure she was just being polite. I was sure she was being careless with that word. But still, it was the first time someone had called me their friend with the intention of actually meaning it. I inhaled shakily. Alexia blinked, then furrowed her brows and whipped her head toward me. Samael, are you crying? Wah, no, I sniffed. Shut up. Alexia's grin turned into a devilish little smirk. You are crying. I am not crying, I snapped, furiously rubbing my eyes, which, by the way, were not tearing up. It's just sweat. I'm just sweating from my eyeballs. Oh, sweating from your eyeballs, are you? She leaned forward with the most punchable, innocent expression imaginable. Does it only happen when someone says something nice to you? Apparently so. I coughed and looked away. Usually people are too dumbstruck by my divine looks to say anything in my presence. Anyway, don't tell a soul about this. Alexia broke into a fit of laughter. Ah, don't worry, Samael. I won't tell anyone that the great and fearsome young Theosbane has a heart. Good, I said stiffly. Because if you do, know that I'll resort to committing emotional violence on you in return. Her smirk widened, even more teasing. Oh, will you now? Pray tell how. Maybe by hugging me. I flinched. Don't test me, woman. That made her laugh again. I don't remember exactly what we talked about after that. It was mostly stupid things. But we talked for a long time. And I began to think, maybe this journey wouldn't be as tiresome as I'd thought. Chapter 275, 5-Star Suite. A whole day had passed. The overall mood of the group was still not very good. No one wanted to travel. Thus, we unanimously decided to take a rest day or two. A slow pace was much better than distractedly rushing through the death zone, after all. So we only walked until we found a large, hollowed tree. Its cavernous interior was spacious enough to serve as our makeshift base for now. The gouged trunk was so wide that all of us could comfortably sit inside, with plenty of space to spare. Moss covered the walls like natural padding, and the heavy scent of damp wood stuffed the air. It wasn't exactly luxurious, but compared to our options of either camping out in the open or getting cooped up underground, it felt like a 5-star hotel. There was just one problem. A very hostile, very toxic tenant had already inhabited our 5-star suite and was refusing to vacate the place for our use. "It's a snake. It's a giant snake," Ray shouted, pointing his camera at the absurdly gigantic creature before us. "Oh, gee, thanks, Ray," Vince replied with a mock smile of gratitude before snapping. "We could all see that it was a snake, you moron." Alexia coughed into her hands. That earned her a solid 3 seconds of silence, followed by Vince blinking down at her in dawning horror. "Right, my bad. Not everyone. Can you guys shut your squabbling and focus for a second?" Michael barked, voicing exactly what I was thinking but was too busy to say myself. Because in front of us was a snake at least 25 feet long, with a pair of human-like ears, and a smaller second head sprouting from its neck. Its scales gleamed a sickly green under the crimson moonlight, patterns shifting as it slithered, muscles rippling beneath its wet, leathery hide. 2 fangs, each as large as a person and sharp enough to grind stone to dust, jutted from its maw in a downward curve. Every breath it took sounded less like breathing and more like the hissing of a steam engine. According to my appraisal, it was classified as a lesser beast, putting it in the same class as upper B-ranked hunters. This thing was inside the hollow tree. And when we, in our infinite wisdom, stepped into its nest, it attacked us and then followed us back outside. Right, so what do you think, chat? On a scale from, "oh, crap," to, "we are so screwed, how bad is our situation?" Comment down below on our chances of survival. Ray said into his camera with his usual stupid grin, then turned to Vince. "And what do you think, Vince?" Vince groaned into his hands. "I think I should have ridden my will before coming here." "Focus," Michael barked again, dodging the snake's whip-like tail. "And don't any of you numbskulls dare use any kind of explosives. We don't need to attract more monsters to our potential campsite," I yelled before unleashing a barrage of earthen spikes to skewer the beast. But the damn thing was too slippery and too fast. "No explosives, but explosions are my whole thing," Ray protested while dancing back to avoid the snake's coils. I wanted to smack him at this point, but didn't yet have the opportunity. Because in the very next second, the snake lunged straight at me, its jaws gaping wide enough to swallow me whole. I hopped back and once again transmuted the ground before me into a jagged ridge of stone, but the goddamn creature was still faster. Its long, sinuous body twisted and curved before coiling like a spring and lashing forward, bulldozing through the stone spikes I had created like they were made of cardboard. It crashed through them all and just kept coming at me like a speeding train that refused to slow down. Michael charged in from the left just then, brandishing a longsword he swung for the joint beneath the serpent's jaw, but "Michael, left," Lily's urgent voice rang out from behind. As if on cue, the smaller, second head sprouting from the snake's neck hissed and spat a stream of green venom straight at him. Michael didn't hesitate to pivot and slide out of the way just as the venom splattered where he'd been standing a heartbeat ago. The ground melted and bubbled, smoke rising up from the corrosive puddle. "Appreciated," he called back. I used that moment to ready my next attack. The earth around the snake shuddered fiercely before rising to take the shape of 2 colossal hands made of packed dirt and stone. They reached for the beast like the grip of a titan, aiming to crush it in place. But the serpent's body shimmered for a split second, and then blurred forward, faster than the human eye could track. The colossal hands slammed shut on empty air, grasping nothing. "Son of a," I started, but before I could finish cursing, something came whistling through the air. Quiss. A projectile, small, silver, and impossibly fast like a high-caliber bullet shot from a sniper rifle, struck the giant snake square in the side of its maw, jerking its head violently to the left. Thwam! The impact that followed echoed like thunder, scattering droplets of blood through the air. That hit should have blown half the snake's skull off. But its scales, those damn scales held strong. They were so thick that they could very well have been metallic. The projectile left only a shallow dent in them, piercing nothing. A few feet away, Juliana clicked her tongue in irritation. She reached into her outfit and fished out another kunai, twirling it between her fingers before drawing her arm back to take aim. Now, don't ask me where she kept all those kunai. At this point, I'd stopped trying to figure it out. Fine, let's see if it can tank another hit on the same spot, she muttered and hurled the dagger forward with a flick of her arm. The blade whistled through the air once again, and in that moment, Juliana activated her innate power to accelerate its time. The kunai's speed suddenly increased tenfold. It turned into a streak of silver light that zipped straight toward the same point on the snake's scales she'd hit before. And it should have struck the mark. But it didn't, because the snake's second, smaller head moved down and caught the kunai midair, between its fangs, before spitting it away with a hiss. Juliana's lips twitched. Okay, I hate that thing. Seconded, I muttered just as the snake's main head dove at me. But I didn't move from my spot. Because Michael dashed in again. This time, he managed to plunge his longsword into the serpent's flank, cleaving through one of the overlapping scales. His blade didn't cut deep, but it did cut. The snake let out a shrill, ear-splitting cry that rattled my bones, probably because I was the closest to both its mouths. Then it jerked back and started thrashing violently as its focus split between Michael and Juliana. Got its attention, Michael shouted, skidding backward while the beast reared up. Good, hold it down now, I yelled, quickly summoning the axe that Michael had so generously gifted me, the Scorched Oath. It materialized in my grasp in a swirl of shimmering light particles. By this time, Alexia von Zinks herself had decided to grace us unworthy mortals with her presence on the battlefield. She rushed in with a lasso in hand. Yes, a lasso. And no, don't ask what a blind girl was doing with a lasso, either. She spun it once, twice, then snapped it toward the serpent's maw. The loop glowed midair and expanded before tightening around the snake's muzzle like a vice. Got it, she grunted, heels digging into the dirt as the lasso snapped taut. The serpent roared and flailed against the restraint in fury, but before it could break free, Kong leapt beside Alexia and grabbed the rope. Together, they pulled with everything they had. The lasso glowed brighter under the strain. But even then, their effort wasn't enough. The snake was as strong as it was enormous, and any second now, it looked ready to yank them both in. Fortunately, Vince intervened before that could happen. He drew every support card in his arsenal and buffed both Kong and Alexia, drastically boosting their physical prowess. At the same time, Lily tossed a card onto the ground near the serpent's tail. Shrack. From that spot, a tangle of thick vines exploded upward and wrapped around the beast's body, shackling it to the ground. Michael followed up next. After copying my ability, he conjured multiple colossal hands of stone and made them hold the serpent down like an executioner pinning its prey. Keep it steady, I shouted. The beast bellowed in defiance. Its strength and speed were monumental, but against the combined force of 6 of us, it was utterly immobilized. Now was the time to kill it. I jumped. The air brushed past me as I soared upward, then came crashing down, landing square atop the serpent's massive skull. I then raised Scorched Oath high above my head, its obsidian blade veined with molten red, and brought it down with tyrannical force. Thwam! The sound was deafening. The snake's scales shattered like glass beneath my strike. It convulsed in agony, its smaller head snapping toward me in blind rage. But before it could reach me, another streak of silver cut through the air with a sharp whoosh. It was one of Juliana's kunai. And it pierced straight into the serpent's right eye, embedding so deeply that the second head spasmed, then went limp and collapsed to the side. Not that it was needed. I could have handled it myself. But what irked me even more was that Juliana didn't even look pleased with her own shot. She simply stepped back to reposition herself, her expression calm and disinterested. Such a show-off, I rolled my eyes. Then I raised my axe again and drove it straight down into the serpent's main skull. The blade tore through bone, muscle, and finally brain matter. The beast let out one last screech before its entire body sagged and slumped lifelessly to the ground. The battle was over, and now, we could finally enjoy our well-earned 5-star suite. Chapter 276, Campfire. After we settled into our camp, we had a bit of free time. I decided to sleep, or, at least, pretend to sleep so I wouldn't have to do any work around camp. Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I also never claimed to be a model citizen. Sue me. Besides, I was now kind of afraid to actually sleep. Because what if I saw Asmodeus again in my dream again? I really didn't want to risk that, so I decided I wouldn't sleep until we left this death zone. Yes, I know how stupid it sounds, trying to survive a nightmarish dimension while being sleep deprived. And it would have been stupid, if I weren't a B ranker. At my current level, as long as I kept my essence reserves full and got enough rest, I could theoretically go an entire month without sleeping. That should be enough time to get out of this place. Anyway, everyone else was busy with their own thing. Michael and Vince were arguing over whether we should skin and cook the giant snake we'd just hunted. Juliana was sharpening her kunai with the kind of focus that made me wonder if she was secretly planning to use them on us instead. Alexia was meditating again, calm and still, while Kong lounged beside her like a bored but loyal guard dog. Ray was talking to his camera as if he were the star of some horror mockumentary sitcom. Lily was absorbing essence from the serpent's carcass outside, as insects began swarming the corpse, eager to leech off the leftover flesh. A small campfire burned right at the foot of the hollowed tree, its orange glow flickering against the wood and keeping stray bugs at bay. I lay on the mossy floor inside, eyes closed. It was oddly peaceful, almost enough to make me forget we were in the middle of a death zone, surrounded by who knows how many man-eating monstrosities. Almost. Because just as I was starting to feel comfortable, someone kicked my leg. "Hey," Vince's voice drawled, "you planning to contribute to society anytime soon, or is this your retirement?" I cracked one eye open. "Depends. How much am I getting paid?" He gave me a narrowed look. "Nothing." I smiled lazily and tucked my hands behind my head. "Then no, I'm not contributing." Vince groaned and walked off. By then, Lily had finished absorbing her share of essence and stepped inside. "Who's next?" she asked quietly. Juliana stood without a word and started walking out toward the serpent's remains. The others had already taken their share. Since the creature was only a lesser spirit beast, it didn't have enough essence to make a B ranker level up, but it was still plenty to refill the reserves of every C ranker in our group. So, Michael and I decided to let the rest of the team absorb it. Everyone had already done so. Juliana was the last, but as she was heading out, she paused. Her gaze shifted toward Lily, who was crouched beside her utility belt, rummaging through it with a frown. Apparently, Lily was searching for bandages, salves, and a healing potion. That was because Vince's shoulder was still injured from an arrow that had grazed him back at the temple, and Ray's wrist had been sprained doing something. I don't remember what. The problem was, Lily didn't seem to have any healing potions left. So Juliana, who had been silently watching her until then, reached into her own pouch, pulled out a small vial of bluish-green liquid, and wordlessly placed it beside Lily. Lily blinked. She stared at the vial, then at Juliana, then back at the vial again. It was one of the 2 low-grade healing potions Lily had given her a few days ago. Juliana had used one on herself, and now she was returning the other. Lily tried to mumble a thanks, but by then, Juliana had already wandered outside. She knelt beside the giant serpent's carcass and pressed her palm against its scaly hide, absorbing the essence that rippled through the corpse before fading into her hand. I watched it all from where I lay, still pretending to sleep. And I'll be honest, just like Lily, or maybe even more so, I had no idea what the fuck I'd just witnessed. Because the gash on Juliana's leg still wasn't fully healed. So why, in the name of all that is unholy, did she decide to selflessly give up her healing potion? Was it merely out of the sheer generosity of her heart? Yeah, right, was it for the good of her teammates? Please, so why else did she do it? Like I said, I had no fucking idea. Could it be? Could it be that whatever she saw in her nightmare had affected her? She definitely looked shaken when she woke up, so maybe it was possible, albeit not very probable. Then, maybe it was nothing. After all, Juliana was always an unpredictable variable in the game. She did what she wanted, and sometimes even what she didn't. One day she was a saint, helping you through the worst times of your life. The next, she'd torture your dog in front of you because you blinked at her wrong. I couldn't stress this enough, she was truly unhinged in the game. You could never tell what would set her off, or what would please her. So maybe today, she just woke up on the right side of her bed. The crackle of the campfire filled the hollow silence as we gathered around it. I looked up at the red moon spilling its crimson light over the distant horizon, framed against the shattered sky of Noctvale Wilds. And I felt a twinge of sadness. The tale of the bleeding moon, the gods punishing a little girl for trying to change a cruel fate, what a tragic story it was. Somehow, it reminded me of myself. I was supposed to die. I was supposed to die before this arc. And yet, here I was, sitting among the main characters. I had changed my fate. So, was I going to be punished too? Chapter 277, Campfire 2. Thankfully, before I could dwell on that dreadful topic for too long, Michael spoke up. So, he said, tossing a twig into the flames, anyone else still seeing dead cadets from the night sanctuary whenever they close their eyes, or is that just me? Vince grunted. Just you. That was too fast, Michael said, narrowing his eyes. You didn't even think about it. Didn't need to. Vince dismissively waved a hand. What you're describing is survivor's guilt. And it's overrated. Been there, done that. Michael tilted his head at that. I've been wondering this for a while now. What kind of life did you even live, Vince? You sound like you've struggled a lot, yet somehow, you still sound well off. Well off? Vince scoffed like he was offended. Bitch, I'm filthy rich. Richer than half the low-born nobles out there. And before you ask, yes, I'm self-made. Self-made, Michael repeated skeptically. Vince squinted. What, you don't believe me? While those two bickered, Ray was still panning his camera across the campfire like he was filming a wildlife documentary. Day 8 or 9, I think. He said dramatically. The survivors of Knockvale Wilds attempt social interaction to distract themselves from the creeping existential dread. Meanwhile, the argument continued. No, it's not that I don't believe you, Michael shook his head. It's just that being self-made at our age is impressive. Vince gave a proud laugh. Ha, you've no idea of what's impressive, my friend. I once sold a man his own house, and a bride her own groom. I could sell wings to a bird and roots to a tree. That's impressive. Wow, that was some line. Michael looked moved for a second as well, before sighing. And here I am, so broke I can't even afford a mattress. The camp fell silent for a moment. Vince frowned. Ray blinked. Even Juliana, sitting a bit farther away from all of us, wrinkled her nose like she'd just heard something ridiculously unbelievable. What? Ray shouted, baffled. Aren't you one of the top 10 cadets in our batch? Most amenities are free, or nearly free, for us top rankers. Right. Because of his goofy personality, it was sometimes easy to forget that Ray was ranked right below me, the number 2 among the first years. Before Michael could reply, Kong huffed from beside Alexia. His voice was muffled by how comfortably he was lying down. That's because Michael donates everything he gets to orphanages and charities. Michael rubbed the back of his neck, looking a little embarrassed. I just feel bad having so much when some people don't have anything. Wow, Vince said flatly. You're like a walking sermon on humility. Must be exhausting. Michael chuckled. You'd be surprised. Ray zoomed the camera in on him, lowering his voice to a whisper. Look closely, chat. This is a true noble hero, kind, handsome, and broke. An endangered species, really. Michael gave him a deadpan look. Keep that up, and you'll be the first species to go extinct. Ray turned the camera slightly toward himself, smirking into the lens. See, even the kind ones have a dark side. You're both idiots, Vince rolled his eyes. But seriously, Michael, stop guilt-tripping yourself over helpless strangers and build some wealth already. If it makes your holy ass uncomfortable, think of it this way, right now you have less money to give back to the community. But if you had more money, you could give back more. And that is exactly how every righteous civil worker spirals into corruption. Michael smiled softly at Vince's logic. It was the kind of smile that said this is stupid, but somehow it makes sense. Right, he said dryly. So what you're suggesting is that I should become filthy rich so I can donate even more? Vince nodded solemnly. Exactly. It's called the circle of greed. Don't you mean generosity? He shrugged. Same thing. Just depends on who's writing the press release when you get arrested for tax fraud. Michael laughed. But I don't even know how to get rich. Alexia threw her hands up, scandalized. What? Do you mean you don't know? I've told you a gazillion times, Michael. Invest, hold for the long term, and reap profit. I'll even share my own portfolio with you. And if you can't even do that, I added, then just invest in gold. Vince shot me a pointed look. Hey, stop promoting your family business. Everyone knows the Theospanes have a monopoly on gold. I gasped like I was hurt by the baseless accusation. Monopoly? What nonsense. We only own, like, 90% of the total gold market. That's barely a monopoly. And if that's your logic, then you shouldn't invest anywhere at all. Because the Luxara Stock Exchange determines the global market trends. Which means we technically dictate the entire economy. Vince kept staring at me for a long moment, then buried his face in his hands and sobbed. I know. Gods, your family's wealth disgusts me. I chuckled. Meanwhile, Lily had quietly taken out some of the cooked serpent meat and started handing pieces around, laughing along with us. Thanks, I said, accepting a piece. It wasn't half bad, chewy, smoky, and with a faint aftertaste of burnt venom. A delicacy, indeed. For a while, as we all ate, the only sounds heard were the crackle of the fire and the distant chirping of enormous insects in the jungle beyond. It should have been peaceful, and it was, in its own way, but it was also the kind of peace that felt too fragile, like it would break any second. And very soon, Lily did break it. Does anyone miss the academy? Everyone looked up. Ray snickered. Miss what exactly? The daily exhaustion, weekly assignments, horrifying lectures, or morning dorm coffee that tasted worse than what I'd feed to my dogs. Yeah, Lily said with a small smile. That. Michael leaned back, staring into the flickering fire. I kinda do, actually. Back in high school, I didn't have any friends. So these past few months at the academy, with so many people growing closer to me. I liked it. Kong snorted. You know they're only trying to make connections since you're in the top 10, right? Michael nodded. I know, and that's fine. I don't expect anything from them in return. It just feels nice to be included by your peers for once, instead of being shunned. Ray rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Wait, didn't you and Samael go to the same high school? I thought you two were friends. Ha, I barked out a laugh. Friends? No, I bullied him. Ray looked like he heard me wrong. Wait, seriously? Yeah, he did. Michael heaved a resigned sigh. Huh, Ray let out a half-suppressed laugh. Guess you've always been the tyrant. In the brief silence that followed, I furrowed my brows in confusion. When no one elaborated, I finally asked, what? That one word got their attention. Everyone, even Kong, even Juliana, who'd been pretending not to listen, turned to look at me with identical looks of dawning realization. Oh, Alexia was the first to catch on. You don't know. I don't know what? I asked slowly. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances among themselves. At last, Vince decided to answer me. That's your nickname back at the academy, the tyrant. I was stunned, utterly speechless for I don't remember how long. Then I turned to Michael. He gave me a helpless nod, looking unsure whether to laugh or comfort me. I clenched my fist in the air like I was strangling someone. The tyrant, that's the best they could come up with for me. Who did I tyrannize? Huh. I've been on my absolute best behavior ever since I joined the academy. They shared a collective look that said, that was his best behavior. Alexia began counting on her fingers calmly. You beat down 10 of the top 20 cadets. Then gave a humiliating speech while they were carried out on stretchers. Then restricted mission access to anyone below a certain rank. Vince joined in. Oh, and don't forget the time you burned down a dorm. I sat upright. Allegedly, the cadet council still hasn't given an official statement on who did it. And that, Ray said, zooming his camera in on me like he was getting a confession, is why people think you've got the council in your pocket. Basically, they think you bribed the academy. Bribed, I repeated, incredulous. Michael scratched his cheek, avoiding eye contact. Yeah, someone even wrote an article about it in the academy newspaper. But then that person mysteriously got kicked out of the media club. People think you were behind it. I dragged a hand down my face. I don't even leave my room to get food. I make Julie bring me something. You think I'd have the motivation to run a conspiracy? Juliana nodded from the edge of the firelight. That's true. He can't even run an errand properly. I pointed at her. Thank you. Not the best defense, but thank you. Alexia still didn't let go. Okay, then what about the time you controlled the first year's cafeteria dessert menu for a week? I froze. Quote. That's because their desserts were always so subpar. Juliana murmured without looking up. You ordered the kitchen to replace the entire sugar supply. Well, yeah, I exclaimed, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Because they were using low-quality sugar. I'm sorry I care about the culinary well-being of my fellow cadets. Ray chuckled. See, that's exactly why they call you the tyrant. You act like a dictator who justifies every decision with moral superiority. That's not tyranny, I said indignantly. If anything, that sounds like efficient leadership. Vince drawled. Sure thing, Supreme Chancellor Samael. Lily giggled aloud. Michael also smiled. Well, at least the nickname's not that bad. It could have been worse. Oh yeah, I asked. Like what? Like, the Golden Brat, Vince suggested. Everyone burst into hushed laughter. Even Juliana's lips twitched, which, for her, was basically a full-blown laugh. I didn't join in. I leaned back, rolling my eyes as I gazed back up at the shattered sky through the branches, their laughter fading into a comfortable blur. It all felt so warm. Maybe it was the fire. Or maybe it was the rare peace after everything that had happened. Either way, that was the first moment we all truly enjoyed there. Then Vince, because he couldn't help himself, ruined it. So, who do you think will die next? Everyone groaned. Seriously, Michael threw a twig at him. That's your idea of small talk. I'm being practical, Vince protested. You gotta prepare for these things. Statistically, someone's luck is bound to run out soon. Statistically, Alexia said, it'll be you. He gaped. What? She smiled serenely. You talk too much. In stories, characters like you either die right before or after the climax. Ray immediately turned the camera toward him. And there you have it, folks, foreshadowing. Laughter broke out again, and this time, even I couldn't help but smirk. Chapter 278. The Boy Talk, Men, Mist, and Mistakes. 2 days had passed. Our progress was non-existent. We still hadn't moved from our campsite at all. Kong had scouted the surroundings and mapped out the area, but aside from that, no one had done much of anything. Michael was still strategizing, which, in practice, meant standing on a rock and staring dramatically into the horizon like some mythic hero about to embark on a dangerous quest for survival. Alexia spent most of her time meditating beside the campfire, her cane across her lap, looking so serene it was starting to annoy me. Juliana had already gone through 3 of her talk to me and I'll stab you phases. I counted. Vince tried to teach Ray how to gamble. It ended with Ray losing all his food rations in a single game of cards. As a result, Vince ate well for 2 days straight. And me, I was being calm and composed, acting as the voice of reason within the group. Which, as anyone who knows me will tell you, is the most obvious lie I've ever told. Anyway, by the morning of the 3rd day, technically day 11 or so in the Knockvale Wilds, the air had turned colder and heavier. Even the forest mist had grown thicker around the clearing, greatly reducing visibility. The reason behind the sudden temperature drop was unclear. Maybe it was a change of season. There wasn't exactly a Death Dimension weather guide lying around to help us make sense of it. Thus, we decided to ignore it. Yeah, I know, it was a stupid mistake. You shouldn't ignore suspicious activity in a death zone. But we were just a bunch of teenagers back then, and like most teenagers, we had a bad habit of ignoring our problems until they either went away or killed us. So instead of worrying about what we couldn't control, we agreed it was time to gather more firewood, since the last of our dry logs had already been wasted by someone Ray trying to roast a single piece of meat yesterday night. Unfortunately, Kong and Michael were busy discussing monster territory zones and movement patterns. While Lily and Alexia were walking side by side, talking and giggling among themselves, going out to hunt dinner, if unappetizing insects could even be called that. Juliana, on the other hand, was leisurely sitting in a patch of shade beneath a crooked tree. She was currently gutting the enormous corpse of that 2-headed serpent we'd slain 3 days ago. Her icy blue eyes caught the firelight as she worked, glowing faintly. She had already cut the beast clean open and was now in the middle of extracting its poison sac, carefully draining the thick, venomous liquid into small pouches she'd made out of the serpent's own membrane. It was a meticulous and dangerous process, the sort of thing that would make any sane person nervous. And I was nervous, partly because one wrong puncture could completely melt her hands off, but mostly because I was letting Juliana handle poison. Juliana, just the mere thought of that crazy girl equipped with venom-coated daggers was enough to make me dizzy. Regardless, everyone was busy doing something. Everyone except Vince, Ray, and me. So, since we were the only ones free, we valiantly took upon ourselves the heavy burden of finding some goddamn dry firewood. But it was proving to be a challenging task, given the cold air and wet mist. It was also proving to be an incredibly boring task. Still, we walked on, through the damp brush, over fallen branches, in search of anything that resembled a log that wasn't soaked through. We walked and walked and walked, until, click, Ray turned off his camera. Now, for most people, that wouldn't mean much. But this was Ray. He never switched that thing off unless he was changing batteries or having an existential crisis. Then, he looked up at us with an expression so serious it made me straighten instinctively. "All right, gentlemen," he said in a grave tone. "It's time we had a talk. Man to man." I frowned. "What kind of talk?" "The kind of talk that decides if the 3 of us will be best friends for the rest of our lives," he declared solemnly. It's time we rank the girls. I blinked. Vince blinked. Then we both burst out laughing. You've got to be kidding me, I said. Vince folded his arms, smirking. You're so stupid. But Ray, with that smug little grin of his, pressed, oh, come on, guys. We've been stuck here for well over a week. And the girls are pretty. Don't pretend you haven't thought about who's the best one. I haven't. Also, I think ranking people behind their backs is derogatory. I paused, then added, do it to their face. Ray chuckled. Then that's just harassment. And don't act like you're above this, Sam. We've all seen the way you look at Juliana sometimes. I raised a brow, aghast. Yes, I look at her the same way you'd look at a ticking time bomb. Vince hesitated to join in. Then, like the weak-willed man he was, he shrugged. Okay, fine, hypothetically speaking. Really, Vince, I groaned, pinching the bridge of my nose. Unbelievable. Hypothetically speaking, Vince went on, patting my shoulder, I'd say Alexia takes first place. She's elegant, graceful, and composed. Has that whole, untouchable beauty, vibe. Ray nodded vigorously, whispering as if discussing state secrets. That's true, that's true. But Lily's hotter than Alexia is pretty. Vince hummed, you're right, but I've never really seen her that way. Lily's got that warm, girl-next-door charm. She's like the sunshine you marry. The debate spiraled from there as we kept walking. It was exactly the kind of stupid, circular argument only men with too much free time and too little intelligence could sustain. By the time I tuned back in, they'd somehow moved from physical attractiveness to personality scores, moral fiber, and hypothetical dating scenarios. It was tragic. But even I had to admit that it was far more entertaining than looking for firewood. Then, inevitably, Ray steered the conversation toward Juliana. He rubbed his hands together. All right, forget Lily and Alexia. I'm saying Juliana. She's actually the hottest and the prettiest of the three. She's got it both. I froze mid-step. Vince looked skeptical but also mildly intrigued. You're serious? Absolutely, Ray replied with unshakable confidence, like he was ready to die on that hill. She's terrifying. And that's the charm. There's something about knowing she could stab you that keeps the blood pumping, you know. Vince snorted. That's not attraction, that's a cry for therapy. Ray turned to me with curiosity. Wait, Sam, you've been living with her since childhood, right? I nearly choked on my own breath. Excuse me. Vince looked at me too, completely unfazed. What? It's a fair question. No, it's not. I snapped. She's my shadow. So what? Vince asked lazily. I've heard plenty of nobles sleep with theirs. I thought that's half the reason shadows are always the opposite gender of their masters. Gods, no, I shook my head. That's not why. Then what is the reason? Vince asked, looking genuinely interested. I sighed. Because they're meant to be your other half. Everything you're not. Your second eyes, second hands, second personality, the other self that completes your perspective. That's why they're called shadows. And that's also why tradition dictates you only ever get one in your entire life. Vince thought for a second. So, it's like a soulmate thing. More like a mirror, I said, resuming my walk. They exist to reflect what you can't see in yourself. The bond's supposed to be functional, not romantic. Yet there's some obvious chemistry between you two, Ray muttered under his breath. Modern media has romanticized the concept too much, I continued, ignoring him. In reality, many nobles think it's beneath them to even touch their shadows like that. It's considered immoral. After all, a shadow can't technically refuse. So there's no such thing as real consent. Vince nodded slowly. Still, I've heard of plenty who end up together anyway. Oh, there are, I agreed. Some shadows willingly become mistresses or partners. Happens all the time, just not as often as people like to assume. Ray let out a low whistle. Damn, makes me almost glad I'm not a highborn. Almost, Vince asked dryly. Yeah, Ray's grin widened. Because if I were, I'd probably have a shadow like Juliana, and then die in my sleep. I couldn't even argue with that. Well, still, Vince said, pulling us back to the original topic. I still think Juliana shouldn't be ranked number 1. She looks too crazy, but that's exactly what makes her hotter. Ray countered with stupidity. No, it doesn't. Vince threw his hands up. You have issues, Ray, I said flatly. And you're exactly the kind of man she preys on. We finally spotted a few dry logs scattered across the moss. Crouching down, we started picking them up. A little crazy, I understand, Vince continued, lowering his voice. But have you ever looked into Juliana's eyes? There's nothing there. It's unsettling even to me. And I've seen some real psychos. You've heard the rumor that she was involved with Professor Rexard. I'm, like, 60% sure she's the reason he disappeared. I'll admit she's ridiculously hot, but hot enough to risk your life over. Yeah, no thanks. I opened my mouth to respond. But the words I'd formed refused to leave my throat when a voice, an all too familiar, honey-sweet, spine-crawling voice, cooed from behind us. Are you sure? That voice. It was sweet as syrup, and yet sharp enough to make every hair on my body stand on end. I'll make it worth your while, if you dare risk it, she purred. I shuddered. Vince and Ray went pale. Oh no, no. The three of us turned around slowly, as if moving too fast might trigger a landmine. And there she was, Juliana Vox-Blade, standing right behind us with an almost playful smirk across her lips. Her glacial blue eyes gleamed in the mist, looking both enchanting and terrifying at the same time. She seemed overly ecstatic, like someone who'd just found the perfect opportunity and excuse to commit a felony. Ray didn't even flinch at her sight. He just fainted. He fainted like a Victorian-era sick child. Vince, meanwhile, let out a strangled, high-pitched screech that sounded somewhere between a dying seagull and a malfunctioning kettle. Juliana tilted her head, kneeling down in front of him with a smile so sweet it made my stomach twist. Oh, what's wrong, Vince? She asked, innocently batting her lashes. You were just talking about me so confidently a second ago. Vince's entire face flushed red. And no, I wasn't. She leaned in, still smiling. You weren't what? I wasn't insulting you, he squeaked, his voice climbing several octaves higher than humanly possible. Then, in pure panic, he scrambled backward on all fours. I wish I was exaggerating. He didn't even try to stand up. He really just crawled away like a rat escaping from a cat, yelping and tripping over a root. Juliana rose slowly and brushed off her hands. Her expression slipped back into its usual calm. Then she looked at me. I swallowed hard and immediately lifted both hands in surrender. Okay, listen, I said quickly, I tried to stop these two degenerates. But they didn't listen. I didn't even participate in the conversation. Her eyes narrowed with dark amusement. Aha, she took a step closer. I took one back. She took another. I took two. Julie, I said, half laughing, full terrified, let's be reasonable. Here, okay, there's no need to kill me over this. I can still be of use to you. Our deal isn't over yet, remember. We also have a contract. You can't kill me, and I, Kawar. Before I could finish my rambling, a sharp, blood-curdling, guttural roar tore through the forest. It sounded wet and low and hungry. Very, very hungry. We all went still instantly. The whole forest did too. The rustle of wind, the swaying of leaves, the chirping of insects, everything turned silent too unnaturally, too suddenly. Juliana's smile faded as she took out a kunai. Ray also jumped to his feet and swiftly activated his origin card. I summoned Scorched Oath. Vince, still a bit far away from us, drew a short sword without any delay. That's when the roar came again, much closer this time. Kawar. We whipped our heads toward the source of noise, and gasped in unison. Something was standing behind Vince. It was tall, easily 10 feet, and gaunt. Whatever it was barely humanoid in shape, but its limbs were far too long, jointed in all the wrong places, bending and creaking like a broken marionette. Its flesh was the color of burnt ash, rippling like black tar over its bone. Its head twitched and slowly rotated far beyond what a neck should allow, until dozens of eyes, too many to count, opened across its face. Each one blinked out of sync, some horizontal, some vertical, and some just, there, unmoving. When it opened its mouth, it wasn't just one, it was several. All of those mouths converged to split across its jaw like someone had carved a smile into a rotting corpse with a hacksaw. At first, I thought I was seeing things. But I wasn't. That thing was smiling. But that wasn't even the worst part. None of it was as horrifying as what I noticed next. You see, each time that towering creature took a breath, it exhaled a faint white smoke from its many mouths that seeped into the air. That was when it hit me. The mist around us wasn't fog. It was it. No one dared to move, not even an inch. The air felt cold now, much colder than before. In the dreadful silence that followed, one of its countless eyes slid sideways, and fixed directly on us. And then, it lunged. Chapter 279. Run first, panic later, think never. We ran. No, Scratch that. We bolted, weaving between enormous trees, leaping over thick roots, crashing through overgrown ferns and bushes like a bunch of panicked deer getting chased by an eldritch horror. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. We knew we were being hunted. The tsunami of dense white mist surged after us, and we heard that same deep, gurgling, hungry roar roll from it. That animalistic roar was the only sound audible in the forest anymore. Everything else had been drowned by that endless, churning fog. What even is that thing? Vince shouted, sprinting beside me, and somehow still managing to trip every 3 seconds. Does it matter? I yelled back. Just run. If I had to guess, this mist monster, yes, I named it, was probably a low-level greater grade spirit beast. That would put it on the same rank as the Soulwraith Cyclops we'd slain back at the Night Sanctuary. Unfortunately, it had taken multiple C rank and 2 B rank cadets, plus some extreme luck, to bring that Cyclops down. There was no way in hell we could take on something that strong, especially when we didn't even know its abilities, let alone its weaknesses. I am running, Vince screamed, nearly tripping again. Then run better, I emphasized. Moments later, the flood of white mist caught up to us and swallowed us whole. I could barely see a few inches ahead. The fog had completely crippled our visibility. That creature was breathing this mist and controlling it. Guys, I shouted, glancing back. Left, go left. Update. Ray barked into his camera. We're being chased by a harrowing spirit beast. I think the universe is punishing us for ranking girls, chat. Be better than us. Respect women. Juliana shot him a death glare. So why am I being punished? I nearly groaned. Ray, stop recording and focus on surviving, you idiot. Somewhere behind us, Vince screamed again, though this scream was more of a long and drawn-out wail. I turned just in time to see him slam face first into a low-hanging branch. Leave me, he coughed, dramatically collapsing to his knees. Save yourselves. That's what he said, at least. But the look on his face told me he was all but begging me not to leave him behind. I rolled my eyes and transmuted a stone hand from the ground, which grabbed him by the collar and dragged him forward like a grocery bag. Thank you, my lord, he gasped, running next to me once again. I swear I'll stop badmouthing nobles from now on. I smacked him on the head. Shut up and run. And we did. We kept running until the camp was nearly in sight, when all of a sudden. Quar! The roar came again, louder and closer than ever. Something massive slammed into the ground behind us, hard enough to send dirt and mist flying. Once again, none of us dared to look back. Because looking back is how characters die in horror movies. Camp, Ray shouted, spotting one of the trail markers he'd placed earlier. We're almost there. Define almost. Vince wheezed. Like, 20 seconds. We're gonna die in 20 seconds. I didn't argue, because he wasn't wrong. That roar was getting closer and closer with each passing second, which meant the mist monster would be on us any moment now. Phew, just as that thought crossed my mind, as if on cue, the monster was indeed on us. But it didn't come from behind. No, it appeared right ahead. Out of nowhere, the mist in front of us warped, and a tall, gaunt silhouette stepped out of it. Its body was black as ink, its limbs far too long, its head twitching in jerky motions. The creature let out an inhuman screech and swung one of its grotesque arms down on us in a wide arc, its claws slicing the air with enough force to send ripples through the fog. What the? Ray started a curse, but then thrust his hand forward. Eat this, you bastard. Flume. What erupted from Ray's palm was a blinding explosion that scorched the forest floor and tore through the mist. Incinerating fire bloomed in a violent flash, and the shockwave that followed blasted the surrounding trees backward. The fog scattered, and for a heartbeat, the forest before us was visible again. Ray gulped, lowering his smoking hand. Did I get it? Vince grimaced. You jinxed it. Yeah, he jinxed it. Because sure enough, as soon as the smoke cleared, the mist came roaring back, thicker and heavier than earlier, swallowing everything in white. The fire guttered out, and the light died. And worst of all, there was no sign of the mist monster anywhere. Okay, Ray muttered, spinning around, sweating bullets. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Rule number 1 of horror movies, Ray. Vince hissed. Never ask that question. Let's just run. Ray looked at him, waited for half a second, and nodded once. Then, both of them turned tail and immediately bolted toward the camp again. Wait, don't run off, I shouted. This mist muffles all sound and it's so dense that you can't see anything in it. You'll get separated. But it was too late. The two morons had already vanished into the fog. Gods damn it, I clicked my tongue, tightening my grip on Scorched Oathen, preparing to run after them. But right then, thap, I faintly heard something, or someone, dully hit the ground behind me. Julie. I whipped around. She was on one knee, breath hissing between her teeth. My stomach dropped when I saw that one of her legs was caught. Something dark and slick was coiled tightly around her ankle, emerging out from the mist. The monster. It was reforming again, rising from the fog like a corpse clawing its way out of the grave. And that's when the realization hit me. This creature wasn't moving through the mist. It really was the mist. The entire forest fog was its body. It could disappear and reappear anywhere within it, also making itself intangible against any physical attacks. Juliana gritted her teeth. Why, is it always the same leg? She took out a kunai, looking only mildly annoyed even as the towering creature fully materialized above her, raising one massive claw. But before it could swing, I hurled Scorched Oath straight at it. My axe spun through the air like a cartwheel, and passed right through the monster's body without any impact or resistance. The blade literally phased through its inky torso and struck a nearby tree instead, slicing a deep scar across its broad trunk before embedding itself there. The mist monster dissolved instantly, vanishing into the fog again. I dismissed Scorched Oath and rushed over to my shadow, crouching beside her to inspect her leg. The skin around her ankle was slightly swollen and tinted blue, looking slightly frostbitten, nothing serious but still enough to make me worry. Are you okay? I asked. Juliana waved a dismissive hand at my concern, her tone as dry as ever. It's fine, just a sprain, I can still run. That was all I needed to hear. But just as I helped her to her feet, several loud noises resounded from somewhere far in front of us in the mist, snapping my attention taut. There was a thunderous boom of an explosion from the right, its sound muffled by the fog. Then, there was a sharp clang of a sword striking something hard and tough from the left. Vince and Ray. It seemed like they were fighting that creature separately. I gritted my teeth. That beast is splitting us up. The mist wasn't just messing with our senses of sound, sight, and direction, it was dividing us. It was isolating us on purpose. It was toying with us. And I'd had enough of that. So I slammed my hand onto the ground and activated my origin card. The earth started shuddering almost immediately, trembling as if hit by a localized earthquake. The ground cracked, massive trees around us toppled and roots wrenched free. An entire section of the forest floor itself buckled and heaved upward. A circular platform of stone and dirt shot up from the ground, rising fast, uprooting underbush and tossing debris aside. The mist broke apart against our ascent as the platform kept rising. And there, on opposite edges of the rising platform, I saw two familiar idiots. Ray on the right, Vince on the left, both panting, both bloodied, and both looking like they'd just been in the middle of a hellish fight. Ray was bleeding profusely from a long gash across his back, and Vince seemed to have taken a blunt hit on the left side of his ribs by the way he was limping a little. They had drawn multiple cards from their arsenal, but both of them froze mid-attack as the ground beneath them started rocketing skyward. Ray blinked, looking around confusedly, jaw slack. Vince lowered his short sword with a groan. I hate this place. I told you both to stop. I yelled at them. Don't let the monster separate us. We have the numbers advantage. Even if we can't hit it, we can cover each other's backs. Do not run off in panic. There's never a need to panic. Juliana tapped my shoulder. What? I gazed at her. She silently pointed downward. The circular platform we were on was about 25 feet in diameter and more than 80 feet high. It looked like a lone island of stone adrift atop an ocean of thick, white mist. The fog was thinner up here, allowing us to see and hear better. For a brief moment, I let myself believe we were safe. Because if the monster itself was the mist, and we were above the mist, then it couldn't reach us here. It couldn't harm us here. That made sense. It was a perfectly logical, absolutely foolproof plan. Right, yeah, no, because the very next moment, the ocean of mist below us began to rise like a ghostly tide. Ray turned to me expectantly. Can we panic now? I sighed. Sure. Chapter 280. Unappreciated Brilliance. I had a brilliant idea. And by brilliant, I mean the kind of desperate, half-suicidal, and crazy idea that might get us all killed but was worth a shot. I pressed my hand to the stone floor beneath our feet and activated my origin card. The entire circular platform we were standing on shuddered violently. A deep, grinding rumble echoed from below as wide fissures ran along the length of the stone pillar holding us aloft. Dust trickled from the cracks, followed by the sound of something splitting apart. Then, from the base of the massive pillar on which our circular platform was situated, from inside those wide fissures on it, jagged and jointed limbs of stone burst outward, looking like the legs of some enormous crab. Yes, I'm not kidding. 6-pointed, stony legs unfolded from the pillar's sides, stabbing into the ground with a thunderous impact that made the forest tremble. Ray's jaw fell open. Samael, what did you just do? We're going on a crab ride, I said flatly. Hold on to something. Because that's exactly what the entire structure now resembled, a towering stone crab, with our platform as its shell. Before anyone could voice objections about safety or sanity, the giant rock crab started walking. The whole platform lurched forward. THOOOM. The stone crab legs moved in heavy rhythm, stomping through the forest with enough force to make the earth quake, crush boulders, and send shattered roots flying. Ray screamed like a child on a roller coaster. Vince nearly lost his footing and would have tumbled right off if he hadn't jabbed his short sword into the ground, clinging to it for dear life. Juliana, on the other hand, didn't even flinch. She simply stepped behind me and wrapped both arms around my waist, her short white hair whipping in the wind. I stayed perfectly upright with ease since I was the one controlling the transmuted structure. Every motion of this crab-like mecha was the result of my own will. Why don't I ever get to hold the pretty girl? Ray yelled over the thunderous stomps. Why is it always him? Because you can't even hold yourself straight. Vince shouted back and clutched his sword tighter like it was the only thing between him and death. Meanwhile, the makeshift stone automaton, which I decided to call the Crab Mobile, tore through the fog, each of its colossal strides carrying us forward dozens of meters at a time. For a few glorious seconds, it actually worked. We were fast. The Crab Mobile was unstoppable. We were going to escape. Thump! A heavy jolt shook the entire structure. The Crab Mobile's front legs faltered for a brief moment before regaining balance. I scowled. Juliana's fingers tightened around my waist. That wasn't just your usual bad driving, was it? Nope, I said tightly. And before I could defend my impeccable driving skills, another thump came, harder and sharper this time. The platform trembled uncontrollably beneath us. Vince's eyes widened. Please tell me we just ran over a tree. We certainly did not just run over a tree. Something had hit us deliberately. The mist monster. That damned beast was attacking us. It was hammering at the crab's front legs so it could topple us. I gritted my teeth in frustration and barked over the chaos, brace yourselves. But my warning came just a second too late. KRAKOOOOOM. Another deafening impact struck from below. And this time, the entire Crab Mobile stumbled forward as its front legs were demolished. The colossal stone mecha buckled under its own weight, and then tipped. Our world tilted, wind roared in our ears and gravity started dragging us downward. Soon, we were plummeting to our collective death. The crab tower of stone and packed dirt collapsed completely, crumbling into itself and taking us down with it, half free falling as the dense white fog rushed past and the ground hurtled closer. Giant trees snapped like matchsticks. Splinters and shards of bark exploded in every direction as the Crab Mobile crashed through the forest canopy. But right as we were about to crash flat onto the ground, Ray grabbed Vince midair and fired a small burst of explosion from his palm. That controlled explosion worked as a makeshift jet propulsion and slowed their descent. Wisps of black smoke trailed around them as they landed in a rough roll. Both groaned in pain, but at least they were alive to feel it. Juliana and I hit the ground next, or rather, I hit the ground. She simply fell into my arms, one hand still gripping my shirt as if it was perfectly normal. My knees caved slightly, but I straightened and took the shock like a champ thanks to essence reinforcing my body. Behind us, the Crab Mobile crashed into the ground with an earth-splitting thwaum. The shockwave that followed rippled like a drumbeat, scattering mist and chunks of rock everywhere. I held my breath and took the brunt of the shockwave's impact on my back, swaying slightly but still holding Juliana close to my chest. When the tremors finally faded and the debris settled, I coughed out some dust. Well, that went about as well as expected. Juliana uncurled herself against me and gave me a flat stare. Then, with infuriating calm, she brushed a speck of dirt off my collar. You mean disastrously. I rolled my eyes and dropped her, but she twisted and landed on her feet with the agility of a cat. From a few meters away, Ray groaned and pushed himself up as well, coughing into his sleeve. Remind me to never let you drive anything. Ever. Vince spat out a leaf, wincing as he straightened himself. Yeah, no offense, Samael, but next time you have a brilliant idea, just keep it locked inside that genius skull of yours. I scowled at all three of them. Hey, you know what, you ungrateful little misbegotten pillocks. I'm hearing a lot of complaints and not nearly enough thank yous for saving your worthless lives. There was a short silence. Then Vince opened his mouth, probably to question my vocabulary, but didn't get the chance to say anything. Thrum, a deep rumble rolled through our surroundings like thunder being dragged through stone. Immediately afterward, the mist started flooding back in on us again. We all froze. Doesn't look like our worthless lives are saved yet, young master, Juliana remarked dryly, much to my annoyance. Vince spun toward Ray in a rush. You'll get a 25% power boost in your innate power if you vow not to use it for the next 2 hours. Do you accept? Ray didn't even think. Yes. As soon as he answered, he thrust out his hand toward the approaching fog and unleashed an explosion so bright and brutal that it painted the world in orange. KWABOOOOM. A miniature sun erupted from his palm, evaporating the mist in a roaring inferno and momentarily clearing the field around us. For a brief heartbeat, the forest looked alive again, alive and burning under a light so blinding that we had to cover our eyes. Then, just as the light dimmed, we ran. The mist came crawling after us once again, seeping through the trees like a living tide. But we were faster, for now. Juliana's injured leg was slowing her down. Ray was stumbling a little due to the severe blood loss from the wound on his back. And Vince was still limping to the side every other step thanks to whatever hit he took to his ribs earlier. In short, aside from me, everyone's condition was far from optimum. Thankfully, though, our camp was finally in sight.